It appears the trade war's first major battleground will be in the heart of MAGA country, as an automaker is laying off American workers. Today is April 3rd, 2025, and the trade war is back on the agenda on Follow the Lead podcast. Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Valerie McLaughlin. Stellantis announced it's shutting down 2 assembly plants, one in Windsor, Ontario, the second in Mexico. The Windsor plant makes minivans and the Dodge Charger. This plant will close for 2 weeks, starting on Monday, and 3,200 Canadian workers are affected. The Mexican plant makes the Jeep Compass, and 2,600 workers will be impacted. These plant closures will have an immediate effect on the factories that supply these 2 assembly plants. 900 workers at 5 factories in Michigan and Indiana will be laid off. And this is a result of the Trump administration slapping 25% tariffs on foreign automakers. And this is likely the beginning of the bleeding. As I've discussed on previous podcast episodes, the North American auto industry is integrated. Parts can go over the Canadian, American, Mexican borders several times before they are put into a final product. There is no vehicle that is fully made inside the United States. And to complicate things even further, parts that are made in North America will contain components sourced outside of the continent. Liberal leader Mark Carney, who's still the Prime Minister, was back in Ottawa today to deal with the auto tariffs. Mr. Carney reiterated that the relationship Canada had with the United States is over, and while that is a tragedy, he said, it's the new reality. Canada will respond to the auto tariffs by placing 25% tariffs on vehicles imported from the United States that aren't free trade agreement compliant. This won't impact auto parts or vehicle contents coming in from Mexico. I have some anecdotal information. A friend of mine was telling me that the auto dealerships that she was visiting on the weekend in the Ontario city that we both live in were quite busy. People were looking to purchase cars before the tariffs came into effect, which is smart because I'm just speculating here. Inventory will likely be extremely limited once more closures start to happen. For my international audience, auto is big business here in Ontario. Unless you live in a big city like Toronto, Vancouver, or Montreal, you need to have a car. During the pandemic, auto inventory was very short in supply. We had to buy a new vehicle and we had to wait months for it to be delivered. We couldn't even test drive because there was no demo vehicles to drive. Canadians are continuing with the boycott of American goods. My husband returned from the grocery store earlier today. He managed to get the last sleeve of applesauce in the President Choice brand because it has a Canadian flag on the shelf, which indicates it's a Canadian product. Its counterpart, a brand called Mott's, well, it's not selling. Apparently there's lots still sitting on the shelf untouched. Moving on to the United States. Stock markets reacted to the president's economic freedom tariffs by moving into the red. Major American markets had their worst day today, the first time since 2020. Nike, Best Buy, Tesla, Boeing all closed in the red this afternoon. Last night, 4 Republican senators broke away from their party to support the Democrats in a bid to end the first round of Trump tariffs placed on Canada in February. Mr. Trump laid 25% tariffs on Canada and used fentanyl as justification. The administration has backed away somewhat from those tariffs, saying imports coming into the United States from Canada would be exempted if they were compliant with the existing free trade agreement. The vote by the American senators is symbolic. Even if the bill is to get to the president's desk, Mr. Trump has said he won't sign it. Since launching global economic warfare, countries are starting to prepare with their own counter tariffs and countermeasures. Even though markets were hemorrhaging red today, and countries are indicating that they will respond with their own tariffs, the president seemed unbothered. He posted the following this morning on his Truth Social account, all in caps, ending with 3 exclamation points. Quote, "The operation is over. The patient lived and is healing. The prognosis is that the patient will be far stronger, bigger, better, and more resilient than ever before. Make America great again." Unquote. Mr. Trump's former vice president from his first term, Mike Pence, chimed in, throwing water on his former boss's tariff plan. Mr. Pence posted the following yesterday on X. Quote, "The Trump tariff tax is the largest peacetime tax hike in U.S. history. These tariffs are nearly 10 times the size of those imposed during the Trump-Pence administration and will cost American families over $3,500 per year." Unquote. America has been down this protectionist road before. 95 years ago, in 1930, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act was enacted. The act's initial intent was to protect American workers and companies from the impacts of the Great Depression that started the year before. The thought was, by erecting international trade barriers, American companies would face less foreign competition in the domestic U.S. market. However, by placing tariffs on goods entering the United States, just made the Great Depression worse. Countries retaliated by placing retaliatory tariffs on American goods. Global trade steeply declined. Also, people weren't purchasing products. The American people, who were already pressed economically, struggled as tariffs raised prices on consumer goods. The 2 men the act was named after, Republican Congressman Willis Hawley and Republican Senator Reed Smoot, both lost their re-election bids in the general 1932 election. Republican President Herbert Hoover, who signed the act into law, was trounced that election by Franklin D. Roosevelt. Although the next presidential election is more than 3 years away, the midterm elections will happen in November of 2026. That's it for this 20th episode of Follow the Lead podcast. If you want to know more about me or the podcast, you can visit the podcast Substack. Search for Follow the Lead podcast and you should find us. I'll try to link it in the show notes. If you want to reach out to us directly, send us an email at followtheleadpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.